Jason, and thank you for coming. This is the last Brain Health Team presentation of the year. We've been trying to do this monthly throughout the year. Normally, Ina would be here, but for those of you who know or don't know, she is out of ICU. She's in the hospital. She is in a room. They're doing workup. They don't know what's wrong. No calls. Okay? No phone calls. Even though she's at the hospital, please don't call. Okay? And in her place, I welcome you on behalf of the Brain Health Team. I'm still Pat Hauk. Our other team members, Tom Gilder and Susan Smith, plus Ina, and Mara Malou back there. Today's presentation will be with your own neighbor, Peter Roberts. And the discussion, fitting with our purple shirts, is Alzheimer's disease. With a different perspective than you might have, the one thing that we want you to know is we're in a great place to be, to share discussions like this. So I'm turning it over to Peter and letting him introduce the part of him that he wants you to know. Peter?
Hello. Hi. It's good to see so many friends here today. I'll get a little emotional at times, but that'll pass, and then I'll go back and do it again. Linda and I have been here for 2 years and a half. It's been a wonderful experience for both of us. We both have gained a lot from being here. The welcoming from the community has just been terrific. Each of you has been very respectful of Linda. You've been very welcoming and respectful of me, and that's very much appreciated. This talk is somewhat informal. If at any time you'd like to make a comment that's germane to the topic, or if you think that I might be able to add something in that part of the talk, please do that. Otherwise, let's wait till the end, perhaps, for questions, observations, and I plan on being very open about our experience here. One of my goals, though, is to tell you a little bit about Alzheimer's disease in general, and then even go into a little bit about the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. But I think it's also very important to know that I'm not a practicing physician now, and you all have physicians of your own. Your family has physicians. So those are the people you should really contact if you have questions about mental status of people or how to proceed. Lately, the field of Alzheimer's has changed. Definitions of different types of Alzheimer's have been a little better clarified, or perhaps a little more muddled, in that a lot of Alzheimer's types sort of blend into each other. But over the past 3 years, there's been some pretty impressive new medications that will have an effect on those people that are now diagnosed with very early Alzheimer's disease, or just mild cognitive changes. And it's like Alzheimer's is like any disease. Linda was born too soon, because if she developed Alzheimer's disease now, there would be a treatment to slow progression, not to cure the disease, not to go back and make brain function better, but perhaps her disease could have been stabilized. So I think of that as as other diseases have progressed as well. For example, AIDS. When you think about AIDS, the first patients I saw with this disease had very short lifespans because there was no treatment. But now, and over the last 20 years, 25 years, people with AIDS have been treated and have been able to survive. So let's proceed a little bit, and let me tell you a little bit about who Linda is. We first met in Germany. We were both in the U.S. military. We lived on a military base in Munich, Germany. It was to the south of Munich. You think I need those? And right next to the base, or just beyond the base, was an area called the Perlacher Forest. And it was a wonderful nature area. People would ride their bikes there. They would hike there. And I had asked Linda if she would like to take a bike ride with me. So I appeared at her apartment. I had a Peugeot 10-speed bike, which I was very proud of. So when I went to pick up Linda, she appears with a 3-speed Raleigh bike. Now, she was very proud of that as well because it was a family gift and a beautiful bike, but it was heavy. It didn't have all the gears. So we took off through Perlacher Forest, and she did great. We went a total of maybe 8 miles. And southern Bavaria is very hilly, but not steep hills. But at the end of the ride, there was a steep hill. So I scooted up the steep hill. Linda labored up the street hill. And when she got to the top of the hill, I could tell she was disappointed that she couldn't keep up with me. But the story changes. I invited her a couple weeks later to join me in a bike ride. I go over to Linda's apartment, and she appears with a blue 10-speed bicycle. That was great. So we started out making our second bicycle ride, and Linda always seemed to be in front of me, and I could never seem to catch up to her. And at the last hill, she was actually ahead of me. And it's been that way pretty much ever since as well. Uh, but things changed over time. Uh, we lived in Kingston, and we were not far from the rail trail, the Walk-Hill Valley Rail Trail. It goes from Kingston to Rosendale to New Paltz. It was about a mile. It was a hill. There was a hill that you had to descend initially to get there. So we would often ride to Rosendale. It was about 16 miles round trip. And Linda would always be in the lead pretty much, but we were together. So we would get to the end of the rail trail when we had to ascend some back streets up to our home, about a mile's distance. And as usual, Linda would take off and be the hare, I'd be the tortoise. So I got back to the house and Linda wasn't there. And I thought, gee, that's sort of strange. But I wasn't worried because she's a pretty independent lady. And about 5-10 minutes later, Linda comes up our hill and said, I got lost. And it was a pretty significant event because it was our neighborhood. We'd ridden bikes there before. So if we go on to about 6 years ago, we were again on the rail trail, and we approached Springtown Road, which is where the Walk-Hill River bridge is. And Linda got to that intersection and didn't know what to do. She actually fell off her bike. And I had never seen that previously because, again, she was strong, she was independent. So it was a matter of judgment. Her judgment had failed her. She didn't know how to respond to that event. So I think what we're seeing is a progression of Alzheimer's disease. We're seeing somebody who was very functional, then somebody who got lost, which is one of the earlier stages of Alzheimer's, and then somebody who in the later stages has a judgment problem of how to proceed and what to do. And Linda's mind worked the same way too. When I first met her, I was very impressed by her knowledge base. We would go out and I might have some questions about the meaning of a German word. She was fluent in German. Um, um, or I might have a question about history or current events, which would come up to my mind. She would often have the answer to that. And if she didn't have the answer, the next time we would go out, she would. She'd look it up. And this was before computers, before searches. So I think of her as one of the original Google search engines. And that always continued as well. When we first got back to Kingston, Linda was able to help me. Are you hearing me okay? Linda was able to help me set up my medical practice. It was still an era where there were single doctors, and I set up a practice on my own. So she really managed that. She set up the reimbursement schedules, and I just appeared at the office. Actually, that's the way I worked all the time. I just appeared, and she took care of everything. And then following that, there were 3 kids, and they came pretty closely. They were just 2 years apart, and she managed the family affairs. I often said to her, gee, I just feel I'm not contributing. I'm just showing up. I leave at 7 in the morning, come back at 7 at night. And she reassured me that I did have a purpose. And she said there were 2 things I did well. I was the social organizer for the family, and I was the athletic director for the family. And those were my jobs. Linda contributed a lot in the community. She was very active in her church. She headed up a project to replace 10 tall Gothic windows in her church in Kingston, the Fair Street Church. She was active on the Board of Education, not as a member, but as a critic. So she had an activist side and was effective in that. At one time, there was a school administrator who was a particular problem, and she was very instrumental in seeing that problem was taken care of. She was also part of a national organization called Parents for Public Schools. She founded the local chapter in Kingston, and then she was on the national board for that. She also contributed to volunteering at the local library, where after school she would tutor young elementary school students. And that was very rewarding for her. She spent maybe 20 years doing that. In the summertime, she would take part in their summer programs for kids. But things did change. And this would go back probably 8 years ago. About 8 years ago. We would always sit down about this time of year to make contributions to charities. And we have a discussion about monetary amounts, what charities we might give to. And that was it. Then Linda would always write the checks, do the book work. But we all of a sudden got to a Christmas time, perhaps about now, where she said, I can't do this. I can't figure out how to do it. And she was the one that always took care of the checkbook. She always took care of kids' expenses. She paid tuition for the kids when they went away to school. I really wasn't involved much in any of those daily financial things that went on. She also would take care of our house and our gardens. If there was a problem, for example, with um, a leak in the house or a leak in the bathroom, she's the person that could find it and repair it. One time we had to get a plumber and also a carpenter in to find a leak. They couldn't do it. Linda could. Um, if there was an electrical problem, if a light didn't work in a closet, Linda could figure out how to correct that. Um, but then, as I mentioned before, those skills were lost. She also would be an avid reader of the newspaper. In the morning, the New York Times was what she often read. And I noticed that all of a sudden she really wasn't reading it. She was skimming it. She was just the topics would just roll by, and the discussion with her about topics like that was lost. So there are many examples like that of mental loss. Perhaps one of the most interesting ones was our gardens in our house that we had. We had 2/3 of an acre in Kingston. We had a nice backyard. We had a side yard, and Linda spent uh, upwards of 6, 8 hours a day in her yard. Um, she was pretty amazing too, because she loved to weed, and she was so physically fit that she could weed standing up. You know, I look out into the backyard and here's this person leaning over weeding. You know, I can hardly get down on my knees. Um, but it turned out that she lost that interest. And before we moved to Woodland Pond 2.5 years ago, um, she no longer could spend time in her garden. She'd be out there for 15 minutes along with me, and she would come back into the house. Um, um, so let's go back to the beginning of when this diagnosis was recognized, because I think it's interesting. Linda was the one that recognized this. One evening at home, she said, "I'm losing my memory." And that was a surprise to me. Um, in retrospect, yes, there were some things that were evident, but I certainly didn't recognize that. But she said, um, I can't remember where I've left things. Um, I, I, I've been searching for my passport, which I know is at home. I can't find it. Um, so also at that time, we had a family situation where we were called upon uh, to help out one of our kids and their family. So we were away from the home for 4 months in Boston at the time. And for 4 months, Linda took care of a family that consisted of 3 young children, all less than 10. She prepared the meals. She took care of all of their needs. It was a medical problem with our son's wife, but fortunately solved. Um, but it just, in retrospect, was amazing what she could do and function. Later that year, um, all of a sudden, she had a lot of trouble with driving and with getting lost. We lived about a mile and a half away from her hairdresser, about a mile and a half away from her dentist. And she'd get lost just going to those places in her immediate neighborhood. Um, on 2 occasions, she called me and she said, I don't know where I am. I need to go to the dentist, but I can't find them. And these were people that she'd been going to and providing services for many, many years. So let me tell you a little bit about diagnosis, what medical care was like. Um, in my medical practice, which was primary care, one of my partners was her physician. So we went to see Kelly Jercola was her name, and um, Kelly gave uh, a mini mental exam. Now you've all taken that because those are the three things that you have to remember. Um, I've had to do that many times too, and my fear is not remembering those three things. I'm there, you know, they're telling me in my own mind, I'm trying to recall those three things, and it's not so easy when you're upset about it. Um, so, how did Linda do on her first mini mental test? Well, she got 27 out of 30. Um, she had trouble remembering the objects, those things like table and banana and wristwatch, those sort of things. Um, so, uh, the diagnostic workup at that time was pretty much exactly the same as it is now, and this goes back about 8 years ago. So she has an MRI scan of the head to make sure there's not some process going on other than the Alzheimer's disease, because the MRI in an Alzheimer's disease patient will be normal if they don't have other medical problems. Um, So some blood work was done. Blood work is thyroid tests because hypothyroidism can cause difficulties with memory, and then some tests for vitamins, which are associated with mild dementia generally. And those tests all came back negative, as we would have expected. So then we went to Boston to Brigham and Women's Hospital for to their memory clinic. That choice was made because our our son works at that hospital. Um, she was seen in the memory clinic there by two physicians. They spent about an hour with her. I wasn't there during that interview. And then I was called in for the assessment, and they said she has Alzheimer's disease, period. Um, and then I said, well, could it be other things? Could other things be contributory to this? Now, Linda's mother had normal pressure hydrocephalus. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. It's not an uncommon disease. It has to do with enlargement of ventricles due to obstruction of the flow of spinal fluid from the brain towards the spinal cord. And it was of interest because her mother had normal pressure hydrocephalus. And it's not necessarily a familial thing, but we were familiar with it because her mother had manifestations of that. They said no. I said, well, Linda's been in Africa in the Peace Corps. She was very sick with malaria at one time. Could this be related to that? Could she have a parasitic infection? Could she have chronic inflammation from having had the malaria? And they said no. I then said, well, what about sleep apnea? Um, because Linda would snore on occasion. And I said, is that possible? There could be periods of low oxygen or anoxia producing that problem. And they said no. And that was pretty much it. So we drove home back to Kingston. Linda drove. Um, got back into the house. This is hard. Linda started crying. I've hardly ever seen her cry. It was interesting. She said, um, I don't want my grandchildren to see me as a crazy person. So Linda was placed on two medications at that time, both of which you've heard of. One is called Aricept. The other one is Namenda. Aricept was first approved in 1996 for dementia. Namenda, which is added on to Aricept, usually came out early 200s. And that combination was started on her. She is still on those same drugs. No other drugs have come about that make any improvement over, over the hope that Alzheimer's will be slowed down a bit. So she is still on those two drugs and no other drugs except she's on a multiple vitamin and she's on some vitamin D and calcium. Um, Linda has no other physical problems, has no physical problems. She remains incredibly strong. She can hike 5 or 6 miles a day. We enjoy going to Minnewaska, walking around the lake, or walking on the rail trails, or going to Kingston and doing the Sojourner Truth Walk along the Hudson. And those are good things because they're things that we can do together. Um, she also has certain things that are preserved, which are interesting to me. She still can do jigsaw puzzles. And she can still sit down with me and we can do a 300-piece jigsaw puzzle. And for some reason, she's able to spatially visualize the pieces. And a piece will be sitting somewhere. She'll grab it, turn it around, insert it in the puzzle, which to me is rather remarkable. Now, she spends a lot of her day doing crossword puzzles. They're books from Simon & Schuster. They have 300 puzzles in them. And in the back, they have 300 graphs, which give you the answers. I'm buying way too many of those. The budget for those books of crossword puzzles is quite high. She can, in about 3 weeks' time, she'll do 300 of those crossword puzzles. And the way she does them is interesting. She'll go to the crossword page, then she'll go to the answers, and then she'll take her pencil and she'll put the answer in the row, usually horizontally. She doesn't get to that conclusion through her own mental activity. It's done through merely copying from one side to the other, and it's done very well. It's very clear how the entries are made, and when she finishes each puzzle, she makes a check mark and goes on to the next one. It's a good activity for her. As Anita knows, she can also play Scrabble. And she's actually quite good at it. She can connect words. She'll often make 3, 4, and sometimes 5-letter words. Now, she won't know the strategy, whether it's a double word score or whether it's a triple letter score, that sort of thing. But she's still pretty quick at it. And we just played this past weekend. We played a Scrabble game in 30 minutes, which is pretty quick. And she gets great joy out of finding those words. She'll smile and be happy that she can do that. So there are some interesting things that she's still able to do. Has her disease progressed since we've been here? We've been here 2.5 years, and it has, not precipitously. For example, when we first arrived, she could look at a menu in the dining room and she could order on her own what she wanted. She can't do that anymore. Although she often likes to get the salmon along with the coleslaw and the broccoli. So everybody knows that. So they pretty much bring that without asking anymore. The other thing people ask me is, can Linda talk? And it's an interesting topic. She was always very quiet to begin with. She was never one to speak a lot. In fact, I said to one of my sons, I said, Linda doesn't talk. And his comment was, well, Dad, she's always been that way. But she does talk on occasion, but not often. For example, recently we're in in my apartment here on South, and we were leaving the apartment, and Linda says to me before the door closes, "Pete, don't you want to take your keys on the table?" Now, that surprised me for her to say that. She often doesn't speak much to me, but she was right. I had left the keys on the table and we were ready to leave. I would have been locked out. Uh, Sometimes when we'll be waiting for an office visit or something of that sort, she'll say, "Can't we go now?" Um, when I say goodnight to her at night, she'll often say thank you to me. Um, One time I said to her in German, "I love you." She answered me in English, same words. Um, and when I go to her room to pick her up for dinner, I'll say, we might be lingering, and she'll say, "When are we going to go?" So there are phrases that she will come up with. Um, let's talk briefly about the Woodland Pond experience for her. Um, I think her care has been excellent. The staff treats her respectfully. The staff doesn't get frustrated with her or the other patients, which I think is quite remarkable. The demands on them are high. You know, imagine working on a dementia unit for 12 plus hours a day, where communications with the residents are very difficult, and where their activities are a little unpredictable too. Now, Linda has been a very good resident there. However, she has her quirks and things that are sometimes unpredictable. Um, Lately, for example, she's refused to take her pills at times. She'll also put her medications in her mouth, and the staff will leave, and then she'll take them out of her mouth, put them in a cup, and hide them away. So sometimes I'll look in a dresser drawer, and there's a cup full of some medications. Um, the other issue is other things like showers, for example. Um, Linda will, on occasion, refuse to take a shower, as do a lot of people in the memory care unit. And sometimes she's adamant about it, and the staff will tell me about her response to that. Um, she's also somewhat unpredictable when she goes to meals. She's known for, if she gets to the mealtime a little early before the meal is served, she'll get up and leave and go back to her room. So they know to pick up Linda for dinner just as the meal is being served, or she will leave. And to me, that's all pretty interesting because Linda was a very independent woman. Um, and for her to have to sort of receive orders and to be told what to do is pretty remarkable. So these people have lost a lot of their identity, lost a lot of their ability to take care of themselves, obviously. But the staff is good. When we were at home, Linda would wear the same clothes every day. She didn't want to take a shower. Here, her clothes are changed nearly every day. And the staff has been attentive to her needs from a clothing uh, uh, aspect. And they'll say to me, "Well, Linda needs 3 new bras. She needs some new underwear. She needs some pads." So I've learned how to do these things, which I never thought about before. So her stay in Garden View has been a very positive one, I think, for her and certainly for me as well. Um, you often, hear people having complaints about care, about the healthcare facility, and that's true. I think all people are so concerned about their own loved ones over there and realize that perhaps some of their needs aren't met as they think they should be met. The family members think. But I'm impressed with the way that the unit there has worked. A quick word about Alzheimer's disease. Lately, there have been a number of articles about the types of dementia that are present. And Alzheimer's disease is felt to be 60 to 70% of dementia diagnoses. But more and more, there seem to be overlaps between Alzheimer's disease and other degenerative diseases. For example, vascular disease. Dementia can certainly be very much a part of people that have cardiac disease, that have had mini strokes or perhaps larger strokes. There are other forms called Lewy body dementia, where there's a different protein inserted through the brain rather than the amyloid proteins that are associated with Alzheimer's dementia. And there are other things. Parkinsonism, for example, is associated with changes of dementia, which is similar to the Lewy body type dementias. And lately, there have been some newer type dementias described as well. In fact, within the last week, the New York Times has had an article on the types of dementia. So for years, Alzheimer's disease was really totally treated by the two medications that Linda is on currently, one being Aricept, the other one Namenda. Those are brand names. But about 3-4 years ago, a new treatment arrived, which offers some hope for people with Alzheimer's disease, and treatment which Linda probably would have received 8 or 10 years ago had it been available. The treatment is an immunotherapy antibody that's created to one of the proteins that's seen in Alzheimer's disease. There's clumping of an amyloid protein, which is seen in the brain of people with Alzheimer's disease. And this antibody, which is given initially every 2 weeks, then 4 weeks usually, initially given by injection, IV, but now it's subcutaneously available. And what it does is it attacks those amyloid proteins in the brain and helps get rid of them. And it's felt that these amyloid proteins in the brain are a cause of the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. They're felt to be a product of inflammation in the body, an attempt by the body to fight something. So it's not these particles, these amyloid particles are not the direct cause, but they're a contributor to the disease. So the question comes up, what causes Alzheimer's disease? What is this? And the answer is unclear. Nobody quite knows what that is. And that's what we need to find out if we're going to be successful in battling this. Now, what inflammation could cause a problem? Lately, it's felt that maybe viruses have caused a low-grade encephalitis meaning an inflammation of the brain. And if a low-grade infection is present over long periods of time, then these amyloid protein depositions can occur in the brain. Now, I often think of Linda. Well, what about when she had malaria back in Africa? Is it possible that there was some chronic inflammation associated with that? Malaria can cause encephalitis. And we do know that Alzheimer's disease is a decades-long disease. People that develop Alzheimer's have had that disease for 10 or 20 years already. It's not something that just occurred within a very short period of time. So the current, what happens with these new treatments. There's two of them that are immunological agents that can attack that amyloid. And apparently it can significantly slow down the development of Alzheimer's disease. But Alzheimer's disease can still progress even though you get rid of those particles. But slowing down at a significant rate is really a big change in the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. So if somebody like Linda presented 8 years ago, I don't think there'd be any talk about her receiving the current medications, Aricept and Dementa. I think the recommendation would be, hey, we're going to go ahead with this new immunological treatment to slow down and hopefully stop the rapid progression of Alzheimer's. I want to mention some sources that I think are helpful. I'm a big fan of the Harvard Health Letter. Do any of you get this? Yeah, there are a few people here. I think this is a remarkable publication, and it frequently addresses Alzheimer's disease in a very practical way. Just recently, there have been articles, for example, on blood testing for Alzheimer's disease. There's now an approved, FDA-approved test for Alzheimer's disease. It's a very reliable test. It's testing these proteins that are present in the brain that are also present in the blood. And the test, 80% of the time, the test is either strongly positive to diagnose Alzheimer's disease or strongly negative to not diagnose Alzheimer's disease. 20% of the time, it's an in-between area. This is a big step because people that have early signs of Alzheimer's disease can be tested. If they're positive, then treatment plan can be made. And currently, these tests have only recently been approved, so there are probably issues with payment on them. And also, there's issues on the cost of these new injectable drugs, these immunotherapy for Alzheimer's disease. What's the cost of that going to be? Because it requires multiple injections of a new medication. It requires a lot of brain scans to be done. So it's an expense. I've dominated the time here. I had thought maybe I'd have a little conversation with you folks, but I just kept going. So I would welcome your comments. Again, I think it's important that if you have questions about brain health, you really need to speak to your physicians or your health allied people individually about that.
Linda, from the day I met her, is such a lovely woman. And, it's like she doesn't probably remember who I am, but there's always something there when you're speaking to her that she just seems to really respond. And it's wonderful. And she's very fortunate to have a husband who's so devoted.
Given that the symptoms occur much after the onset of the disease, should any of us go and try and get the test even before we have symptoms? Is it available?
It's a good question. There are a number of tests that you can get without a prescription from different companies that have some reliability currently. The new test will be interesting. Who should get that? The Harvard Health Letter says that only people that manifest mild cognitive that have mild symptoms uh, should receive this test. But of course, a lot of people are going to want to do this. And I can't answer the question. I think, yes, it's going to be an issue on how that's controlled. It'll be an issue on how these new medications are administered. And these new medications, these intravenous medications, are not totally benign either. They can cause brain swelling. They can cause bleeding in the brain. So it's like any medication. There are side effects that can occur.
Peter, first of all, thank you for an incredible presentation. I have a friend whose mother died of Alzheimer's, and she is concerned that there might be a genetic component. I'm wondering what the research says about genetics.
There are some ties, apparently genetically. There are a set there's a set of people that can get Alzheimer's disease in 40s and 50s, and that disease can definitely be related to a familial trait. There are also genetic pieces of information that 20 to 30% of the community has that make you a little more likely to get Alzheimer's disease, but not fully likely to get the disease. But it's generally not a disease that's an inherited disease. Mm.
Having had dinner with you and Linda several times, she never has spoken much. She's also always very pleasant. But one night when we were having dinner, she just kind of touched my arm and she pointed down to the floor where my glasses had fallen out of my pocket and I had no idea and they would have been left there. But I mean, she didn't say anything, but she was sure that I knew that what had happened. And I thought, she was very aware of what was going on around.
That's both good and bad, really, because it's great that she can recognize that, but she loves to pick up things. And you've noticed that if there are crumbs on the table, even in front of your place setting, she will take care of them. And you'll notice that she folds everybody's napkin at the end of a dinner. But she does love to pick up things, and it can be a problem. For example, Linda enjoys vanilla ice cream. So we'll frequently go to Stewart's in the evening to get ice cream. And she ends up picking up all the trash in the parking lot. She should really be paid for that. But that's one of the things she does well. Yeah. Rolf.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Rolf mentions what about self-awareness? And that really intrigues me. Linda has never spoken about having Alzheimer's disease. She used to get more frustrated at herself before the diagnosis was made than she ever did afterwards. And it's just amazing that disease just seems to affect memory. Isn't that strange? Why aren't there more other brain functions that it affects? But I think that Linda's fortunate, and I'm very fortunate, that she hasn't had behavioral changes. And that's not always the case. There are a lot of people with Alzheimer's disease and with these other dementia forms that we've talked about where hallucinations, where anger, acting out, psychotic episodes, sundowning. That's where people get confused and agitated around the dinner time. Linda's never had those symptoms, so I think it's fortunate. But why doesn't she recognize that she has that now? And she's also very, very positive. Every day I say, well, how are you feeling? She always says, fine. I mean, there must be one time when she doesn't feel fine. But that seems to be what she said. On the other hand, she never had complaints about health or things like that beforehand either.
Thank you so much for your willingness to share such deep emotion too. So I feel okay asking the question about the grandchildren. How do they respond to their grandmother?
I think I'll start with our kids. It's been quite a while since Linda has known children. Oh. Particularly hard on her daughter. The boys' lives keep going on, but Linda feels Susan, her daughter, has a strong tie. I guess his daughters do to their mom, and that's been a hard. As far as grandchildren are concerned, um, 4 of them are younger than the age of 7, and they seem to get along very well with her. And she, even though she doesn't know them, still does puzzles with them, plays games, plays catch, runs around with them, and they welcome her. Uh, uh, but again, she really doesn't know who they are. Last year, we had an interesting situation where our our 3 kids and their families stayed in New Paltz at an Airbnb, and as they were leaving, each grandchild was giving hugs to their grandmother. And the littlest one, who was about 4 years old, gives a hug. And Linda said, "Thank you for coming to see me." It was a showstopper. Everybody didn't understand that. Yeah. So it is too bad that she's missing out on that. But on the other hand, it's nice to see her interact comfortably with them. So I certainly appreciate the way all respected her, interact with her, and don't hesitate to get right up to her and say hello and say hi, because it'll generate a smile when you do that. And I do think she has some recognition of some of the people that are here when that happens. Yeah, Karen.
Thank you very much my sister died of Lewy body disease, so I just can imagine the impact that this has had on you to present, and I thank you for that. But I have a question for you. You know, we hear through the internet, if you do crossword puzzles and Sudoku and you read that you're going to ward off Alzheimer's disease, is there any valid reason for to say that?
Well, I'm trying to do that. I don't think it's recognized that it really helps much. Yeah, I think the process continues.
Peter, where is the fine line between old age forgetfulness and, wow, this is something I have to be aware of? What's the difference?
I think it's hard to know. You know, the brain loses cells regularly. Memory for everybody fades regularly. And it's certainly a very individual thing. I mean, we have some people in our community here who are truly amazing at very advanced ages. So that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Yeah. In terms of mental function, why do some people function so incredibly well at 100 years old? Yeah, yeah. In the back. No.
Oh, okay. I'll pass this mic to you in 1 second. I'm Anne's daughter. Thank you so much. I work as a companion for people with dementia. And going back to what you were saying about people here going up to Linda and saying hello, and I was wondering if there were any programs where the people in independent living work or visit with the people in memory care, And just because I see how much just playing music or dancing or playing catch or something like that can really spark somebody's enthusiasm, and just wondering if there's a program here for that.
If you want to pass the mic to Jill, she's right in front of you.
Jill here. Okay.
Oh, the other Jill.
We do have that. We call it Neighbor Corps, and we're actually sort of ramping it up next month because there's a lot of new residents here who didn't know about it. But we do encourage people in independent living to participate in things over in the health center and especially in Garden View. And some of them have taken us up. One of them is every Tuesday goes over to Garden View and spends an hour or more there telling stories, playing games, whatever the mood strikes them and him. And we definitely encourage people to go over. Some go over, play cards. And that is one thing that we're doing very actively here, is trying to make this one community.
Jill in the back.
I just spent a week in Maine with my sister, and her husband has Parkinson's and Lewy body, and watching this, in reality, he's in a very good situation in a residence, but supporting her has been a challenge for me and really for her. So I'm wondering from you, what is the best thing that has helped you get through this?
Wow. I think recognition of what was going on with Linda and also how it was affecting me. Linda never wandered. She never had any emotional problems. And I had quite a bit of independence, but there were so many things that she used to do for me and for our family that she could no longer do. It became very evident to me. And one, for example, was taking care of the house. I would all of a sudden have to do laundry. Another issue was food. I've never prepared food myself, except I would grill foods. And the way Linda was a tremendous cook. And up until about 4 years ago, she regularly prepared meals. I would often set a menu and she would do the meal. And then we would survive that way because I would grill meat or an entree about 8 months out of the year, and she would make a salad to complement that, and that worked. But all of a sudden, that didn't happen anymore. Maintaining the yard was just something I could not do. So probably about 4.5 years ago, I decided that we couldn't manage at home. It just wasn't going to work. And I think that was very fortunate that I had that recognition. And it led to us coming here 2.5 years ago to a very good environment where she is taken care of, where I have independence to do many things and many projects. So I think my survival has really been coming here into this new environment. So we're very fortunate that happened. I don't know if that answers the question or not. Sure.
Coming here for you, what particularly has helped you other than playing golf and swimming?
The question is how is coming to Woodland Pond helped me? Is that right? Yeah. And I think meeting a lot of new friends has been terrific. And I've had so many different relationships with so many of you in the audience, whether it be playing bridge or pinochle or attending the photo club group, which has been great for me. I spend a lot of time taking photos of the trees and the plants here. You've seen me on the trails doing that. And other activities like book club, for example. There'll be books I'll read and I'll say, hey, this sounds good. And I will attend a session with that. I was never a swimmer, and now I swim once a week, which is great. And so sociability is pretty important for me. There's one problem I have, and I've tried to address that by learning how to play bridge and those sort of things. But there is an element of loneliness. There is an element of isolation because I've left a home where I had that. But I think this environment's terrific for somebody like me. I'm very fortunate.
How did you handle the transition for Linda? The transition from your home to Woodland Pond?
Yeah, transition. It went remarkably well. It happened very quickly. We came to Woodland Pond 5 or 6 months after I initially came here. And the transition was a quick one. And our kids helped tremendously because they would come weekly from Boston and from Philadelphia. They'd work out of our home in Kingston. And they took care of a lot of things, which I wasn't very capable of doing in closing a home. In dealing with Linda, I just stressed that it was the best for both of us. Now, did she comprehend that? I don't think so, but it perhaps helped me to address it in that way. And in retrospect, I'm surprised how well she did. All of a sudden, we were in our own bedroom every night for 45 years, and all of a sudden she's in memory care one night. So initially she wanted to leave. She'd pack her bags every day. She had to have a monitor because she'd try to go through the door on occasion. But again, the routine here was pretty good because every day we'd go out for a hike. Every day we'd have dinner together. So there was a routine established. But I think she did remarkably well. I mean, not everybody does it, I think, as easily as that. Yeah.
What else? Peter, we thank you. Thank you for coming. And if you have any further questions about the brain health team, you see the purple shirts. We're happy to talk about it. Wonderful holiday, everybody.